I'm going to be doing one more Quicksilver Sphinx article for October 93, and then I'm going to be doing Chapter 6, which is actually quite a long and very active one. And then I'm going to be calling it a day because, honestly, I don't want my voice to give out completely trying to overdo it all at once. So, yeah, welcome back to Black Wolf. And of course a cat promptly heard me talking and decided to get my attention. Come on, sweetheart. Come on, if you're coming. Came live on Silver? I don't remember saying the word silver. Anyway, welcome back to Black Wolf. I'll just re-say pretty much everything I did say. I am picking up, I'm going to be doing the, Silver, the Quicksilver Sphinx, that's it. I'm going to be doing the October 1993 article, for the Quicksilver Sphinx, and then I'm going to be doing Chapter 6, of Black Wolf. I did chapters 1 through 5 earlier today, and I'm only going to be doing one chapter because it's a fairly long one, fairly active, and it's I would like my voice to actually hold out for a few more days, and this is a bad time for a sore throat, I think. So let's get back into it, and I'll pick back up tomorrow afternoon too. I'm not going to leave you hanging, I promise. October 1993. Miscellanea by Nick Winter. Wow! Samhain's coming fast. Check out the list of Samhain-related activities on the back... Samhain-related events on the back page. Anyone who missed Exotica's Wild Hunt deserves great pity. Coven's Winter, Sundark, and Dandelion went together, and afterwards, being forever faithful to my readers, I quizzed them for opinions. Unanimous. Exotica has definitely recovered from Maeve, and they're back on track. I even talked Flynn Sundark into writing a review of it. It's on page 3. I couldn't have said any of it better myself. The new coven I mentioned is actual fact. Coven Elam, that's Silver Fir for anyone behind on their tree calendar, has been born. Blessed be cousins, and may you love each other, one another long and well, and may you be only the first of many this coming year. Eleanor Moonstone and Darcy's hand fasting went marvelously. I'm supposed to thank whoever did the weather, and will whoever made that sinful chocolate cake kindly step forward and confess? 4 covens, at least, would love to get the recipe. We'll run it here if the guilty party doesn't mind. Other than one of Ambra Moonstone's cats deciding she wanted to be cuddled by Eleanor right in the middle of the invocation to the goddess, all went smoothly. I don't believe I'll ever forget the sight of Eleanor swearing her love to Darcy with a grey and white fur ball in her arms. There's going to be a pet show in December, like the one last year. It'll be on the weekend of December 4th and 5th in the community hall. There are classes for domestic long hair and short hair cats, purebred cats, a few classes for dogs including obedience, and a class for exotic pets. Judges will include Samantha, Peter Blackbird, and Ilya Prism. If you want to register for it, stop in at Sam's. There are forms there to fill out. Like any cat in Haven could give Samantha's Alfari a challenge for domestic long hair if she ever entered. Gardens grew passably well this year. Not as well as last year, but everyone who uses herb magic should be all right for the winter. There are 6 people selling a wide variety of herbs. More details of who has what are up at the White Stag and the other usual places. Other news, and I'm going to try to keep my anger on a leash while I write this. Coven Whitethorn has pulled their most insane trick yet against Coven Sundark. I won't go into detail because Sundark asked me not to, but they gained a new friend out of the mess. Mid to late teens, male, dark, slender, likes to wear black, his name's Jesse. Take it easy on him if you see him around. He is completely innocent of magic and badly torn up psychically. As for you, Rebecca, give it a break already. What are you trying to prove, anyway? Historical notes. Lindsay opened Venus Alive, our very own store for the erotic arts, 4 years ago on the 9th, despite many people telling her Haven is too small to keep such a place open. Also in October, 7 years ago, the 23rd, Coven Artemisia took over White Stag, everyone's favorite place for all the necessities of ritual and ceremony. And last, but far from least, Solomon's Seal, the best bookstore ever, was opened 39 years ago, the 25th. October must be a lucky month for opening new businesses. The 19th is the birthday of one of our adepts, but I've been strictly forbidden to tell you which one or how old. I'm sure you can figure it out. You only have 2 to choose from. I've been informed that Trista Merrymoon will be writing an article for us in November's issue about magic in traditional and historical blacksmithing. Sounds fascinating to me. Since some mages can work soft metals without needing a fire, would a mage blacksmith need a forge at all, I wonder? That's the end of that article. Chapter 6. 8 people made the living room a bit crowded, but the 2 covens present had shared the space cozily and cheerfully with a 3rd coven and a couple of solitaries, so many times that they hardly noticed. Bane sprawled in one of the chairs, his older brother Brian sitting on the floor at his feet and leaning against the chair arm. Deanna and Cynthia shared the couch with blind witch Naomi, whose broad hips and large breasts, combined with her long walnut brown hair and fondness for full skirts, made Brian teasingly nickname her his peasant wench. The grey husky Gwyn, who served as Naomi's eyes, lay at her feet, to all appearances an ordinary, contented dog, despite his mysterious origins as a gift from Brian's absent roommate Samantha, whose origins were equally mysterious. Kevin lay on the floor, his oldest and favorite cousin Laurie between him and Flynn, all 3 on such a mass of blankets, woven earlier by the 2 mages from the fading sunlight, that it would have made a comfortable mattress. Even watching a movie was more fun this way, Kevin thought. The good-natured discussion did mean that sometimes it had to be paused for a bit, but the varying perspectives of his friends always fascinated Kevin. How people who were so close and spent so much time together could have such diverse viewpoints. Pause, Flynn said suddenly. Laurie glanced at him, and the VCR paused itself. Kevin's first thought was that Flynn needed a bathroom break or a moment to stretch, or possibly a refill from the array of drinks and munchies spread on the coffee table. But the thought vanished instantly when he finally picked up how serious his seer coven mate was. "What's wrong?" Brian asked, probably catching Flynn's mood by scent. Flynn shook his head. "I don't know, but something is. I can't quite get a grip on it, but it's really nagging in the back of my mind." "Then let's circle and see if we can give you enough of a boost to get a fix on it," Naomi said practically. "Someone shove the table out of the way." The ring wasn't technically round, working within the space limitations, but it was good enough for all 8 to be within hand-clasping range of those on either side. Deanna and Cynthia, working together with the ease of familiarity, cast a circle around them to contain any energy raised and protect them from outside energy. To Kevin's senses, it was clearly visible as a glowing rainbow line against the russet carpet, as easy to see as the webwork of strands that bound a coven together, in or out of circle. Hands linked all the way around, and Laurie led them through a simple exercise they all knew well, and used often. One to lower barriers and allow personal energy to flow into a common pool. Kevin tested it automatically, analyzing and identifying the various sources. Varied innate natures and learned skills, the true best strength of any mixed coven, or better still, more than one. The two wolves were part of it, wild and primal, but had little to add. This simply wasn't within their own abilities. Brilliant with fire and sunlight, his own gifts and Laurie's were the most dramatic, and strictly speaking the most powerful, though that came at a cost. They were restricted to that element only. Naomi and Cynthia's came from a soul-deep connection to all the elements, though Cynthia's strongest affinity was with air, and being inside, air's pale colors were much weaker than he had seen them outside. Naomi's inclination was towards earth, especially with plants, and while its greenish dark tones were more muted now than they were in warmer seasons, it nonetheless surged up into the circle with all the quiet vibrancy of spring growth. Deanna's own bond to the earth was very different, not so useful for summoning or manipulating power, but it ran as deep as the roots of a tree and could ground and stabilize it at even very high levels. Flynn's contribution was a more subtle shimmer that danced into bright sparkles each time his inner sight gave him another bit of information. And currently the sparkles were a cascade, surging and ebbing without ever entirely fading. "Something's certainly trying to get through to you," Kevin observed. "What would you like to try first, your cards?" It was a safe bet that Flynn had his cards somewhere on his person. They were rarely out of his reach. Flynn nodded, brought them out of somewhere, shuffled them, and handed them to Brian. "Pick one, then give them to Cynthia." When they finished, there were 8 cards chosen. Flynn took them, kept them in order, and started laying them face up in a matching circle before him on the carpet. A wolf in silhouette, howling at the full moon. A skull. A simple pentagram of 5 lines in a circle, black on white. A grinning gargoyle, its hide a muddy brown-green, crouched with wings spread and claws extended. A tangle of thorny vines and bright roses. An androgynous elf standing in the midst of a rainbow halo of light, hands raised. A pair of crossed swords. A serpent coiled in an infinity symbol. "Oh, hell," Flynn breathed. "We've got lack of hope, magic, a predator involved, protection from a threat, conflict. Generally, kids, someone is in deep trouble and needs help." He gazed at the layout for a moment, his eyes only half focused. "And you know, I suspect that it's probably Jesse. We haven't seen him in a couple of months, and he hasn't even phoned in almost 3 weeks. But there's still enough of a connection there that it would make sense for me to pick up on serious danger. Say, a predator. And that unfinished business card I keep getting whenever I try readings on him is in there, and the wolf with it." "Well, what do we do?" Bane asked impatiently. Kevin doubted Bane cared about Jesse's well-being specifically, but protective behavior came naturally to the wolves, and he suspected Bane had classified Jess as Kevin's pet project. Besides, a predator stalking a wolf, even one unaware and possibly permanently unable to change, would feel too much like an intolerable insult to wolves in general. "I think we need a bit more info on the current situation before we go charging off to the rescue." Flynn gathered his cards together, but kept them cradled loosely in his hands as he closed his eyes, sat up straighter, and slowed his breathing. Kevin watched the sparkles accelerate into a dazzling display of rainbow fireworks as Flynn's concentration deepened, swirling into the currents of power linking the circle, and using that power to spread outside in a broad, misty stream towards the south. The others waited patiently. Kevin and Laurie were at a distinct disadvantage, with neither sunlight nor moonlight available, not even any reason earlier in the day to collect and store as much as possible. The witches, and especially Naomi, compensated for it, feeding power into the common pool, where the mages could monitor the currents, and Deanna, simply by being Deanna, kept it steady and stable. The wolves stayed alert, ready for their chance to act, when or if that came. Flynn's violet-gray eyes opened, but they were fixed on something far away. Oh no, that's definitely a predator, and it's definitely stalking Jessie. What can we do? Kevin demanded. Working on it, Flynn said distantly. Right now, put all the power you can behind wishing him luck. Section break. Jessie scanned the street and the people moving about in the glow of the streetlights, sighed, and leaned back against the wall. By the clock on the church tower, it was past 8:30. Shane was supposed to meet him here ages ago. He could be late for any of a number of reasons. Jess just hoped it wasn't trouble and that he wouldn't be much longer. Hey there. A low voice, but nonetheless a woman's. Jessie looked towards it and froze. There was nothing visible to mark her, just a generally average, tanned, brown-haired woman of middle years in a plain black t-shirt and blue jeans. Even past the city's background of odors, the stranger was close enough for Jessie to pick up her scent, and something about it was just not right, though it was nothing he could put a name to. Every instinct screamed danger at him, and his skin crawled at the thought of those hands touching him. Yeah? He said curtly. Up for a good time? No, just hanging around waiting for a friend. I could be a friend. A particular friend, thanks. He left the corner and moved down half a block. That should take care of it. He was followed. I don't like being turned down, the woman said, menace in the softness of her voice. That's your problem, not mine. He moved again. Not too uncommon, this problem. His appearance was a mixed blessing, and a definite curse in a situation like this. No one seemed to believe that 5'5" and 125 pounds of good-looking teenager could be any danger. Fighting was best avoided, since it led to trouble. Usually it was men, but this wasn't the first time he'd had a problem with a pushy woman who wanted something. The little voice in the back of his mind that was urging him to stand and fight, he dismissed as some sort of death wish, and a particularly stupid one at that. The stranger followed again. Would you get off my fucking case? Jessie snapped. Not interested! He evaded an overly familiar hand and decided to give up and clear out. The woman kept an even distance of about 20 feet between them down the street. Okay. Other methods. Jessie's first rule, never look like you were running. Someone would usually assume you were guilty just on principle. Second rule, to lose someone, find people. He found a store, one of a half-dozen close together, ducked inside and made his way to the back where he couldn't be seen from the door. Height became an advantage. He effectively disappeared behind a tall magazine rack. Just for the sake of looking like he had a reason to be there, he picked up a magazine at random to glance through. Nothing he saw really registered. Nervously, he replaced it on the rack and wandered towards the front of the store. On a hunch, he glanced back, and his guts tied themselves into tight knots. The same woman, just reaching the magazine rack now. Lucky, Jessie would have been right there waiting for her. How in hell was he going to get out of this mess? Fight her, whispered that little voice again, more urgently. It was no less moronic an idea now than it had been the last time he had dismissed it. He passed a driveway between two buildings, the taller of which he knew had apartments on the upper floors, and backtracked quickly, praying. A handy fire escape? Yes. Agility was a bonus here. There was a large garbage bin close enough. All he had to do, tricky though it was in the poor light, was balance on the edge of the bin and reach over to grab the ladder. It came down with a groan, and he scrambled up and jerked it up after him. He was at the 3rd story of 5 when his pursuer reached the bin. She looked up. Jessie looked down, frozen by sudden fear. Watch her be an acrobat or something. But she didn't even try to get up the fire escape. She turned and left in the direction of the street. Jessie breathed a silent prayer of thanks to whoever was watching out for him, and finished the climb to the roof. With any luck, there'd be another way down. Yes, a fire escape on the opposite side. He climbed down into a different space, a cramped, narrow parking lot, and looked around in case he'd been anticipated. All was quiet. He took a deep breath to calm himself, relieved. Someone reached out of deeper shadows and grabbed his arm. Another hand traced a line down his spine. Jessie wrenched away and bolted. Being assumed guilty had just become secondary to being caught. Anyone so persistent had to have some way of making Jessie come with her, and he'd heard horror stories from more experienced acquaintances about some of those ways. After a few blocks, he stopped to catch his breath and glanced back. No sign. Good. Should he circle back to where Shane would be waiting for him, or go to ground somewhere for a while, just in case? Have you ever heard the expression, the thrill of the chase? Leaning casually against a pole, almost directly in his path, the same woman gave him a smile that showed too many very white teeth. How the fuck? Jessie didn't bother to finish the thought. Heart pounding, he spun and fled back the way he had come. A glance over his shoulder without stopping, narrowly avoiding running into a man coming the other way, showed that woman following at a sedate pace. She's a bad thing, insisted the little voice inside. Dangerous to you, dangerous to everyone. Stop running and fight. Against someone who does impossible shit? Oh, just shut up and stop distracting me. Section break. Oh, damn, Flynn said, sending a ripple through the intense concentration, unwilling fortune to work in Jessie's favor. That's one of the higher ones. It's playing mind games with him right now. Bing growled softly, and Brian tensed visibly. Kevin and Laurie, who had too much experience with occasional predators, deciding that a very powerful elven mage's magical gifts were tempting enough to be worth the risks, winced in unison. Try to lure it away from him and to here, Naomi suggested. That would be simpler than a gate there, and would need less of a focus and less power. Could Jessie's nerves take that, do you think? I doubt Jess could survive that, let alone avoid further nerve damage, Cynthia said with a sigh. Otherwise, that would be worth a try. If Jess could handle that, he probably wouldn't need help with a predator, Deanna agreed ruefully. Can you get me a clear fix? Kevin asked. I'm trying, Flynn said. There's a lot of loss over this distance. Naomi nodded. All right, then let's see how much power we can gather up for you to use, Kevin felt her dig deeper, felt a surge in the flow coming directly from the earth below them. Laurie, more used to her coven mate, caught and channeled it neatly into the shared currents, with scarcely a perceptible wave. Kevin gathered together as much as he could from the collected pool, grateful that he wasn't going to have to try to build a gate simply from his own reserves. Silence, while seconds ticked into minutes, and the connection between Flynn and Jessie grew narrower and more dense. Section break. Jessie zigzagged along the busiest routes available, figuring it would be harder for anyone to force anything with enough other people around. He needed to loop back around to where this started and see if Shane were there yet. With any luck, he not only would have arrived by now, but wouldn't assume Jessie wasn't coming and leave. While people tended not to find Jessie at all intimidating, the same couldn't be said about Shane, and Jessie knew of nothing that had ever thrown him off stride. If he could just get there. He saw that same woman, again, in front of him, this time leaning against a parking meter, watching him with that smile, and detoured without slowing to cut through an unfortunately quiet walkway between two old buildings. His pursuer was somehow, impossibly, on the other side as well, blocking his exit. Jessie doubled back, hit the main street, and made it nearly back to where this had started before seeing her again. This time, stepping apparently out of thin air, directly in front of Jessie, so close that Jessie stumbled to avoid running into her. He darted across the street, ignoring the honking horns, but kept going the same direction. How the fuck did she do that? How the fuck do I get away from someone who can do that? Adrenaline was only going to go so far. He was already out of breath, heart thumping painfully hard. This enemy was simply going to wear him down and pick him off at will when he could no longer run. But how could he fight back? Could Shane help against this threat, anyway? That annoying little voice inside told him that, no, Shane was no better able to fight this battle than anyone else in the city was, except Jessie himself. Which should he do? Get into the middle of a crowd and hope that would protect him long enough to catch his breath and think of something? But if his enemy could get close to him, extra bodies around him would be no safety, and that annoying voice yammered that it would put more people at risk. An ambush, then? Get behind the businesses, into the shadows, find anything he could use as a weapon, even if it was just a glass bottle? It was worth a try. Continuing to run wasn't an option. He spotted a driveway that he knew linked to the space behind a shoe store, and a clothing store, and a small drugstore, and veered down it. Sawdust scent, chemical scent, metal tang. Someone had been doing work, maybe on one of the apartments above the businesses. That might be promising for finding something he could use. He slowed to a stumbling walk, headed for a more or less neat stack of what might be lumber or plumbing, or both, against one wall, near a back door. This time, the hand groped his ass, and he had the eerie feeling that he was feeling skin... Oh, goodness. Feeling and feeling. Eerie impression that he was feeling skin on skin, with no insulation by the denim that should be between. He spun around with his full weight behind his right fist, a response too instinctive even to allow time to grab his keys to add to the impact. His tormentor, with no apparent effort, no reaction at all to the force behind it, seized hold of Jessie's right hand in her own and squeezed. Jessie was sure he felt a joint pop, though he cried out. Thought he cried out, but the pain was so bad, it all blurred together. He felt pressure, the pain increasing, as the other twisted his hand backwards, and his legs buckled without conscious thought. He barely registered the sensation of his knees striking the pavement, with the whole world, a white haze, centered on his trapped hand. Section break. Come on, Flynn muttered. We're running out of time here. I'm so close, but so's the predator. Anchor? Kevin prompted, knowing very well that it was useless to ask, and Flynn was already doing his best. "I'll drag him back here through it if I have to." "Not necessary," Bane said, standing up and stretching. As often as they could get away with it, wolves wore mage silks, which meant he didn't even need to waste time taking off clothes. Brian followed suit only a heartbeat later, always right behind his brother and pack leader. Kevin stood up too, and felt Laurie reach out to rebalance the power currents to accommodate motion. Whether the circle would hold across long distance was distinctly uncertain. He took what he could while he could, just in case he lost connection. At least the combination of coven bonds and Laurie's presence provided a sort of insurance. She could create a gate to get him and the wolves back here, if necessary, though using another mage's gate always felt a bit uncomfortable. "You're safer here," Bane objected. "We'll have to protect you too." "I'm coming," Kevin said flatly. "I think Kev needs to be there," Flynn said. "He didn't pull the mage card just to gate you two there and back." Bane sighed, shrugged, and his body began to blur around the edges, turning all over the dark brown of semi-sweet chocolate. In seconds, a huge, shaggy wolf shook himself and looked expectantly at Flynn and Kevin. Brian, in wolf form, was a little smaller, more the color of milk chocolate than Bane's darker fur. Together, they were an intimidating sight. "Hold on," Flynn said distantly. "Almost got it. There. Here, take it." Kevin knew without being told, as the sparkling stream snapped itself tightly together into a cord that stretched off towards the south. Kevin reached along it and found the other end. Clear and precise, more than enough so for him to build a gate safely and with minimal effort. Well, as minimal as effort could be across that much distance. "Be careful," Naomi said softly. "Always." Kevin gestured with both hands. A bright gate swirled into being, woven of moonlight and will. The interior cleared, leaving only the frame and a flimsy curtain of colored light. "You've got it," Flynn said. Bane darted through, Brian on his heels. Kevin was right behind both, and as he stepped through, the gate vanished. Section break. Patrick Lucian raised his head, all senses alert, straining to discover what it was that had just distracted him from the unhurried enjoyment of his luxurious supper. He spotted the brilliant glow of an elven mage's power, and a strong one at that, fading into bright ripples. And now he could sense, faintly, the presence of another mage, where a moment before there had been only himself. There had been none. Now, that's interesting. He abandoned the remains of his beef Penang curry, cloaked himself in illusion that changed his sun-tawny hair dark and his fair skin to a deep brown, and simply walked out of the restaurant without stopping to pay. Outside, he released the illusion, paused briefly to orient himself, and started to walk. I'm sorry, I don't know what just happened there. I know I'm really tired. I think I might have just blurred out for a second. And I'm very, very sorry about that. The cats decided that I didn't need very much sleep last night. Which is the other reason why I'm making this a short stream, just this chapter. Okay. Outside, he released the illusion... simply walked out of the restaurant without stopping to pay. Outside, he released the illusion, paused briefly to orient himself, and started to walk in the direction of the shimmer of fire magic, toying with speculations. Section break. Oh my God, I'm going to pass out. Don't do that. Don't! As though that would make Jesse significantly more helpless than he was right now, with the pressure on his hand making his back arch, as his body struggled to find some kind of relief. His tormentor spat something that sounded like a curse, though it was unfamiliar, and suddenly Jesse's trapped hand was free. He scrambled backwards fast, not caring what he hit, his vision still full of red and black starbursts. "Damn those wolves," the stranger snarled. She brushed past Jesse as though he were of no further importance at all. Not in the direction of the street, but deeper into the back spaces, where there was another small access area and a driveway out the other side. Sobbing for breath, his damaged hand cradled close to his body, Jesse staggered to his feet. A cool arm slid around him, made him jerk away briefly until the scent reached him. Familiar, safety, Shane. He looked up, blinking tears out of his eyes. Shane was at least as tall as Kevin, and Jesse was quite sure Shane was a few years older than him, although he wouldn't have ventured even a wild guess as to how much. His grey tank top and blue denim vest, with the sleeves ripped off, and artfully torn jeans, showed quite a lot of fair skin and lean, wiry muscle. The pale blonde hair he rarely bothered to get cut was held out of blue eyes with a blue bandana. As usual, he seemed oblivious to the chill creeping into the nighttime air this late in the year. "What the hell?" "No, never mind. Tell me later. I'll look at your hand at home." He glanced past Jesse, then shook his head. "I don't even want to know. Come on." "How'd you find me?" "Walk." Shane's arm around him urged him into motion. "At least half a dozen people told me they saw you running from something they couldn't see, and you looked freaked. Obviously not a bad trip. Move home now." Section break. Excuse me while I grab a mouthful of tea. Let's see if I can keep from actually, starting to doze off again. Whoops. Microphone just moved. Okay. Kevin faced the predator, much more calm outwardly than he felt inwardly, especially without the reassuring strength of the circle to reinforce his own. The severing of the connection as the gate closed had been distinctly uncomfortable. The wolves flanked him on either side, both crouching with teeth bared and hackles raised, ready to attack. At least Jesse and his friend were leaving. "Back off," he said coldly. "These two are both under protection of Coven Sundark and our friends." The thing that looked like a woman laughed mockingly. Kevin blessed the fact that it was standing near enough to a metal caged light over a back door that he could see it. "Yeah, pretty name. Has to be a children's coven." Its appearance rippled again to a much less ordinary woman. This one looked perhaps 30, darkly beautiful, if one could overlook the pointed teeth and clawed hands and eyes that were the flat black of oblivion, without iris or white. Those were not the eyes of anything that was alive in the normal sense of the word. Those eyes had nothing behind them except hunger, for the energy of emotion, creativity, and above all else, magic. The dark one should be quite a treat. To be able to have one who normally could fight me? Delicious. "You'll have to go through us. I told you, they're under our protection." "Perhaps I'll have you first," Your silly little coven link only protects against the lesser ones, you know. It sauntered forward and reached towards Kevin. Brian snapped at the offending hand. Had the predator's reflexes been less quick, he might have removed it altogether. Kevin prayed that the wolves didn't have to fight. This predator was vastly unlike the nuisances he was familiar with. Dangerous to the gifted, but easily dealt with by a wolf. Bane, his ears flat against his skull, advanced, snarling. An angry 200-pound wolf was an intimidating creature. All the more so, since his long, dense fur, thickest around his neck, made him look still larger. Brian angled his own approach to one side, to make it harder for it to track both at once. You okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, bit of banging in the hall. My roommate, best friend. Everything's alright?
Yeah, just having a past half hour. I'm okay though.
Alright. As long as you're alright. That would be Indie Diva. She does game streaming. And helped me get this set up. The predator hesitated, fell back a step as though involuntarily, then another. Kevin thought it looked undecided. It decided. It shifted its own shape to that of a tiger, grave black stripes on the rusty brown of dried blood, and lunged at Brian. He slipped agilely out of its way, and Bane attacked it from behind, teeth tearing a long scarlet stripe too shallow to hamstring it. It whipped around, hissing. Kevin retreated so he had his back against the cool stability of a wall, watching the battle, switching alternately through various kinds of sight in order to keep track of it as they moved in and out of the light. The wolves made a smooth team. One would distract it from in front, while the other made an assault from the rear. Then, when it turned, they traded roles. Claws raked down Bane's ribs, not deeply, but enough to make him yelp in pain. The yelp became a growl, and he circled around it, looking for an opening. Brian ghosted in and was gone again, before the tiger even had time to realize he had scored another wound, just behind its ribs and low on its side. It spun around to go after him, chased him a few feet, and swiped at him with one huge forepaw. It connected with Brian's shoulder, but the heavy fur deflected the worst of the damage. The blow knocked him off his feet, though, and the tiger paced towards him. Bane seized its tail in his jaws and crunched down, getting its attention and giving Brian a heartbeat's time to find his feet and get out of reach. Kevin reflected that it was obviously unused to dealing with multiple opponents. It allowed itself to be too easily distracted. The brothers, on the other hand, had a lifetime of teamwork behind them. Bane, by skill or luck, or more likely both, seized a foreleg in his jaws when it came sweeping towards him again. Cat fur. The sheer power pulled him off balance, but he held on. Nothing Kevin knew of could make a werewolf let go unwillingly. The force of their grip was legendary in the mixed-race villages. The tiger, with rumbling growls of rage, snapped at him and shook its trapped foreleg. Brian slid up beside it, closed his teeth on the back of its neck, and bit down with his full strength. The tiger made an untiger-like squeal and went limp. The wolves released it, and Bane sniffed at it to make sure it was dead. It was. It faded to transparent, then vanished altogether, back to whatever non-physical plane it came from. Bane shook himself, gave his wounded side a few quick licks, then turned his attention to Brian. Reassured that he was all right, he looked up expectantly at Kevin. Hold on. I know the usual predators wouldn't dare touch Jesse if they found him at all, and that the greater ones are rare, but I think I know a way to hide them magically. I talked to Thomas about it a while ago, and he had some ideas. It won't hold forever, but maybe by then Jess will heal enough to take care of himself. If we're really lucky, it might even protect Jess from ambient powers, so if he comes back to Haven, it won't hurt him. Are you okay for a few minutes? Perfectly fine, Bane assured him. Being a telepath was useful, Kevin reflected. It must be frustrating for wolves to be in a coven lacking one. Nothing Gisela or Liam can't fix for us. Do what you can. I'd rather not repeat this. Moonwolf and Horned God. What a fight. He didn't sound distressed, more satisfied. Kevin turned his attention to tracking Jesse and his friend. Against the background of the city, overwhelmingly humans with little or no magic, Jesse was only a shadow. Something or someone seeking him would have to practically trip right over him to notice him at all. But since he knew what to look for, and had that spider silk connection as an extra hint, Kevin's search took only a moment. He held that pinpoint beacon in his mind while they left the alley. It wasn't easy to keep moving in that direction when the streets didn't always run the most useful direction, and they weren't sufficiently familiar with the terrain to be able to plan a route in advance. The wolves kept pace docilely on either side, like a couple of enormous dogs. In the darker areas, between streetlights, he tangled a hand in the long, thick fur of Bane's ruff, trusting the wolf to keep him from walking into anything. At moments, he sympathized deeply with Naomi. Jesse and his friend stopped at a battered red brick house and circled around to the side to unlock a door. Kevin heard a deadbolt snap shut behind them. Something tickled the back of his mind. He scanned the street intently, looking for heat patterns. An elf, to show a body temperature that hot. A mage, to have cast an illusion of absence that could keep the wolves from noticing. Not a strong one, given how effortlessly Kevin had seen through it. And he or she was watching Jesse and his friend with far too much interest. Mage, he murmured, across the street. I don't like how intent he is on Jess. What was an elven mage doing here anyway, alone, without even any visible trace of a coven bond to offer passive protection? That seemed like an excessive gamble with predators. It probably didn't matter, though. The other mage's intentions did. I know how to handle mages. Bane growled aloud, low in his throat, a warning. I know you do. Kevin collected power from the city lights around him, though it was a poor substitute for sunlight, or moonlight, or true firelight, and tossed it in the direction of the other mage. It landed neatly at the other mage's feet, and shattered, the shards coalescing into a fiery phoenix, visible only to mage sight, the sparks dancing off the feathers, spelling out his name. That there were at least a dozen named elven bloodlines seemed pointless to Kevin, since there was no such thing as a pure bloodline with a population so limited. However, his father's name was often associated with powerful mages, accurately or not. That was in part why he had chosen to change his own last name from his mother's to his father's a couple of years before. That information, in that form, should tell the other mage everything relevant, and that should be enough to allow this to end with a brief discussion. If there were ever circumstances in which a show of power were actually justified, this should count. Right? Right now, a wolfish pragmatism was probably the best approach. Just keep Jesse safe. Section break. Patrick recoiled sharply, then turned a dark look at the source of the flashy challenge. That, clearly, was the mage whose presence he had been tracking, before the crippled wolf had distracted him. A Leoran, it figured, arrogant bunch that they were, so certain they ruled the mixed villages by right of strength. The mage across the street glowed with power, as though it were the sun itself he wore like a cloak of light, almost eclipsing the heat image of his presence. Patrick scowled. Worse, it was all his own, not so much as a trace of any kind of outside power tinging it anywhere. What right had this Leorin to such dazzling brilliance, when he himself had been born with scarcely enough of the mage gift to be noticeable? He had found ways to even the odds, however, and if this braggart thought to meddle with his life, he'd learn that quickly. "Excuse me." The mind voice dropped into his head with the clarity of diamond, precise and calm. "Do you mind? The two you're looking at are under the protection of my coven, and I'd really appreciate it if you would just forget they exist." Under the protection of a coven? Both of them? The fairer one was simply human, with no hint of power, hardly worth wasting any effort on. The darker one, on the other hand, intrigued him. A wolf, with such heavy damage psychically, that any touch of magic would be sure to be unpleasant for him. How had he gotten into such a state? Curiosity wasn't really worth a fight, was it? Curiosity alone? No. But the tone of that Leorin mage's voice was another matter. He snatched up the lingering power from the phoenix image, rewove it into a dragon of crimson and saffron and sooty black, and flung it back violently. "You do not command me," he hissed. "Mind your tongue." The Leorin mage's shock was so strong that it spilled over before being firmly reined in. "I asked nicely," the other said evenly, after a moment's silence. "I'm asking politely once more. They are under Coven Sundark's protection, and if need be, we will fight, although I would prefer not to." "I do as I please. If I want that crippled little wolf to study, I'll have him." "He's not crippled!" The shout made him flinch in discomfort, laced as it was with hot, blinding anger, and no more controlled than a shotgun blast. Patrick cried out, in outrage and surprise as much as in pain, and hastily flung shields around himself. The effort made his breath catch, as nerves damaged by the attack protested, but he willed them strong and steady. "Want to fight, do you?" He pulled at the light of the street lamps and coiled it into a tightly focused whip, bound into that form by his own fury. Viciously, he lashed it outwards across the vacant street to flay the upstart where he stood. It snapped against glassy smooth shields, which scarcely trembled. Then far too much happened far too quickly. The shields winked out. Patrick blinked, trying to trace where the power used in those shields had gone, but there was no sign of it. Surely no one could draw that much power back into himself so quickly without damage. Something seized the whip, jolting him roughly out of his distraction, to discover that the Leorin mage had coiled the whip's far end around his wrist and was holding it firmly. What in all the hells? No more than 3 rapid heartbeats after the disappearance of the shields, a scorching flood of sheer, raw power surged back along the whip, forcing the flow of his own magic into reverse before it, pouring into him. For the space of another 3 fast heartbeats, he realized just how dizzyingly high a tolerance for power the Leorin mage had, and the utter ecstasy of it. Then it collapsed into the shrieking pain of severe backlash shock. Only distantly was he aware of it when the power flow abruptly reversed again. He swayed and stumbled backward to lean against a wall, trembling. "Leave him alone." Each word came out tightly, with anger and deadly power coiled behind it. "You've made yourself an enemy," Patrick snarled aloud. "So be it," said the cool, light voice from across the street. Just don't touch our friends. He held still, watching, while the Leoran mage built shields around the dark little wolf and his companion. Clever shields, too, deftly created to deflect both detection and active magic. The shields themselves subtle and near invisible, unless one knew where to look. Designed to shunt senses and magic away, not counter them directly. Light swirled and gathered into a gate. Against it he saw the silhouette of the Leoran mage and the two wolves flanking him. Then they vanished through it, and the gate imploded neatly. Show off. No mage should be able to walk after pulling that, let alone be capable of gating. Livid with humiliation and rage, he drew himself together and went in search of a place to sleep. One he'd have to pay for, he realized in disgust. His gifts would be of no use to him for some time to come. He didn't dare even summon his allies. In this condition, he'd be easy game for them. I'll find you, Leoran, and you'll regret ever starting this. Next time, I'll be ready for you. Section break. I believe it's the last one in this chapter. Here they come, Flynn warned. A heartbeat before Kevin's familiar gait coalesced in the center of the circle to bring the trio home. Kevin sank to his knees in front of Deanna and buried his face in her shoulder, shivering. Deanna wrapped her arms around him, hugging him close. What happened? The wolves shifted calmly to human, and Cynthia and Naomi moved quickly to examine what wounds they had, helping them strip off the mage silks for easier access. Mage fight, Bane said. I lost my temper, Kevin said, pressing close against Deanna, miserably. He wasn't very strong at all. I backlashed him. I might have burned him out completely. I don't know if I managed to pull it back fast enough. He looked up at her, tears in his eyes, but couldn't find any more words. He was threatening Jessie, Brian pointed out reasonably. It's not like you just pounced him for no reason and with no warning. I still shouldn't have lost control. Kev, Cynthia said gently, laying a slim, pale hand over Bane's rib scores. The bleeding gradually slowed as she hurried the clotting process as much as she could. Not a lot, she was witch, not healer, but enough. You are nothing like what you were when Dia hauled you away from Rebecca. You've done better than anyone expected at learning how to keep your temper under control, and you've done it much faster. One mistake, under provocation like that, isn't the end of the world. Brian said you warned him first, Laurie said, and it's not like he could have been unaware of how strong you are. If he persisted, then he made his own choice and took his chances. I might have burned out his gifts totally. It's kind of a steep penalty for being obnoxious, don't you think? No, Bane said, unruffled. I don't. We decided to protect Jessie, and we did. Leave it at that, Phoenix. You're tired. Most of that power you were using was pure adrenaline, and there wasn't much light to back it up. That's making things look worse than they are. Someone take down the circle. Deanna simply grounded the raised power directly into the earth, while Cynthia did a hastier-than-normal thanks and dismissal of the summoned elements. As the support of the circle faded, Flynn sagged forward, then let himself sprawl on the carpeted floor, clearly worn out. Dia, get Kev to bed, Cynthia requested. I'll call Gisela and Liam, and then get Flynn into bed. Laurie, can you find Kev and Flynn and yourself something to eat? Naomi, can you keep an eye on the wolves and keep doing what you can? You're better at healing than I am anyway. Laurie headed for the kitchen, and Naomi only nodded, still examining Brian with witch senses and touch for other damage. Deanna urged Kevin to his feet and up the stairs to his room. Stay, Kevin said pleadingly, as she swiftly stripped his shirt and jeans off. I intended to, She wriggled out of her own clothes, equally quickly. By then, Laurie had brought a couple of sandwiches, one of Kevin's homemade brownies, and a glass of juice. She said nothing, but the support and reassurance and love she was radiating were clearer than words could have been between two telepaths. Kevin looked at the food without appetite, but obediently ate, not really tasting it. His rapid metabolism made it too dangerous to sleep without a start on replacing what he had just used. There was no way Deanna and Laurie would let him risk it, regardless of how little he wanted food right now. Only once he had finished it did Laurie leave quietly with the dishes. Deanna curled up with him in his bed, tucking the blankets around him, automatically making sure that her somewhat cooler body was less completely covered. He snuggled closer, resting his head on her shoulder, still trembling. "I hurt him bad," he whispered, "and I attacked first." "Shh, go to sleep. We can talk about it tomorrow." She stroked a hand lightly, repeatedly, over his hair and down his back. "I know, Kev. I know, but let it be for now. Sleep." Even with Deanna's comfort, it took him a long time to fall asleep. And that is the end of chapter 6. And I think I have adequately proved that I should probably grab a cat nap. I'm very sorry about any slightly fuzzy bits at any point today. My 15-year-old cat decided that he needed to wake me up about 3 hours before the alarm goes off for kitty meds time. And between him and one of the others and the fact that it was garbage pickup this morning, so noise outside and stuff, I didn't really get a whole awful lot of sleep. Although compared to a lot of doctors and vet clinic staff and what have you, I'm still better off than they are. So I will attempt to be better rested tomorrow and a little more focused. I'm sorry, and thank you for sticking with me this long. And if you'd like the actual text of this, prismcat.com/blackwolf, with blackwolf all one word. There's several formats there. The most up-to-date version is the Wattpad one. The others actually need to be updated with a couple of small revisions, especially for the chapter that we just read. And I will be back tomorrow to keep reading, and you can find out what happens to Jesse and company. Okay? Everybody have a great time, day, night, whatever your relevant time of day happens to be. And stay safe, okay? And stay optimistic.